Mi padre era capaz de hacer cosas que los demás casi veían como milagros.
Do, 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 do. I've been thinking about every time I hit record to make this video more and more why I love this film and the quality that I can focus in on is its melancholy. Um, then I began thinking about why I like melancholy, um, particularly how it's depicted in this film. And it feels authentic. It feels real. So these are my thoughts on El Sur, which is a motion picture by Victor Eriz. It's a Spaniard film. Okay, let me drag this over here. Okay, I have the Criterion Collection of El Sur, and inside is a Blu-ray disc, the English version of the novella by Adelaida Garcia Morales, and also there's a pamphlet here. I haven't read the English version, so I don't know the quality of the translation. And I also have the physical book in Castellano of El Sur. El Sur, and things that are lost along the way. These are my thoughts on the movie. And I love this movie. It makes me want to live. I love the sensation of melancholy I have after watching the film. Strange to love melancholy, but I do. It's like a mirror. When I look into it, it's so familiar. When the movie ends, I sit alone with my thoughts and feelings. I wander in my mind and think about all the things I have lost in life, all the things everyone loses in their lives. A lover, loved ones, our once held perceptions, the cherished past. All those special moments, all that vanishes, and we have to face the present however cold or unsatisfying it is compared to the past, which is dazzling, full of vibrancy. Agustin had so much heartache and woe within him, a deep chasm it feels like, that his choice, which is called fate by Estrella and witnessed by us, the audience, in the final moments of the movie crystallizes that despair with his suicide. El Sur focuses on a family, a daughter, Estrella, a father, Agustin, and a mother, Julia, who bears a lot of misfortune of her own. And there's a few other characters too. Doña Rosario, Milagros, Casilda, El Carioco, and of course, Irenerio/Laura. Laura being her actual name, and Irenerios being her stage name for motion pictures. Agustin's inability to move forward from Irenerios/Laura, I feel like sets up everything in motion. It's what makes Estrella alive for the first time too, her home situation where she becomes disenchanted with how life is, and all the way to the sense of knowing when to keep secrets, to hide, and save people from pain, such as when she keeps the phone call stub and hides it at the end of the movie. Agustin, who is full of private sorrow, trapped in a sweet dream of who he once was and who was in his life, that being Laura, he's caged in the wondrous oubliette of his own mind. Meanwhile, Julia is a dutiful mother, a loyal and present wife who is not completely forgotten by Estrella, but Estrella does acknowledge in her narration that she doesn't have that many clear memories of her mother from childhood, although she spent most of her time with her, more than with her father. To be less defined in memory by her daughter, and what seems to be less felt for by her daughter, in comparison to her husband, at least during childhood. There's a specific moment that I'm thinking about that I'll come back to later to touch upon this. Her husband, Agustin, meanwhile, is dealing with his past, and heartache of the past creates heartache for Julia with his inability to move on and ultimately his actions. So let me start from the beginning of the film. So these are just comments and things that I've noticed, along with some of my thoughts on the evolution of character progression, or the inability to progress, and what have you. So when we start the film, when Estrella is holding the pendulum, looking down and gripping it in her hand, when she realizes that she's not going to see her father again, that moment looks like a realist painting by French artist Gustave Courbet, which I might be butchering that name because of my American English pronunciation. I'm not too sure how it's said in French. So, in both the opening scene and the first scene after that, Estrella is waking up out of a dream. Their house, the Seagull, was situated between the city and the town, alone, stranded, so much like her father, stranded between what appears to be his past and his present. A point that I really enjoyed was the conversation with Milagros and Estrella at night. Milagros had some insightful comments on the notion of power and morality, or at least the perception of morality. I mean, you can start to debate on what people ought to do in certain situations. There's a lot of philosophers and their respective ideas in relation to morality within the branch of moral philosophy. But that's a whole other topic. But here, at this moment, Milagros says something super interesting, that before Franco won, the dictator in Spain, and took state power, the grandfather was one of the bad guys. Then Franco took power. He, the grandfather, became a saint, and the son, who was a good guy before Franco had taken over the government, became a demon. Right and wrong shifted by who was in control and what the narrative they created that the people within the state had to obey. Words, and just words, Milagros said. And all of this conflict over ideas. It's fascinating to see moral relativism in action. At the same time, you can argue that it wasn't morality that shifted at all, but those with the power, regardless of wrongness and goodness, can punish those who do not align with their ideology. But then again, that's another video. So, right. When mentioning earlier that Estrella does not remember much of her mother when she was young, this made me think of people we have known for longer, such as a friend, yet someone we meet later who also becomes a friend, but we favor or have a greater connection with the friend we met later in life. It's kind of taboo, isn't it? At least it is to me, to tell to their face that their friendship isn't as strong as another friendship they have. And if you know someone longer, it's kind of like perceived at times that that is a factor that adds to the depth of the friendship. But that element, time, doesn't dictate the quality of the friendship always. So her mother is second in her memory. There's less of her, less pronounced, less, which makes me feel for Julia. I know there are moments in my life that shine brighter than others, or people I've connected with, which hasn't been many, but those who I did connect with, some were in my life for only a period of time, a very short period of time, as where with certain people I've known for a longer portion of my life, but that person has left less of an impact. Yeah. Another scene that stood out was when Agustin, the father, goes shooting on the day of his daughter's first communion, which is remarked by his mother, Rosario, as strange, and the wife, Julia, his wife, not the wife, remarks that too, but that she is accustomed to odd behavior when least expecting. This is interesting to me because it's an important day in his daughter's life and has cultural significance and religious significance. But he goes away to shoot instead of being there with his daughter during the preparation. Is he running away from the moment because he can't bear it? That being a culturally and religious significant moment for his daughter? Because there's emotional weight behind it? I don't know. He eventually does show up to the first communion at the end, but it does stick out that he did that. Perhaps I'm reading too much into the scene. So yeah, Augustine does show up to the First Communion. He emerges out of the shadow in the back of the church. And Estrella thinks to herself, he's done it for me. Meaning he came to see her at church, getting her First Communion. Then the following scene, they are dancing, which is very lovely, and they both seem happy. Sometime later, when Estrella finds Arenarios' name, whose real name is Laura, written down, and suspicion over who she is entering her mind, Estrella asks her mom, Julia, if she's ever heard of her, and she says no. And Estrella lies for the first time when her mom asks who she is, and Estrella responds with a new girl in her class. Both the birth of her first lie and her first suspicion, it begins to morph into an awareness that her father is keeping a secret. And she says in the film, she, at that moment, became his accomplice. This is a moment where Estrella starts to transition of losing childhood wonder and belief, and now doubt and curiosity leading to unsavory things about people. Those are things that are beginning to grow and enter her mind, her very investigatory mind. I have you. Continuing to when they have a fight after the movie night. Agustin and Julia, that is, and Julia tells Agustin he can go talk to her, which I assume is Laura, and she doesn't want to know anything about it. The fact that she says her, so she knows who she is, and it feels as if they must have talked about it in the past to the capacity, or what details are still a mystery to me. But Julia must know enough of his history and hers to be able to analyze what occurred. Shortly after this fight between both of the parents, Estrella burns the program, the little card she picked up at the movie. Yeah, she got that little pamphlet thing from the ticket person at the cinema. Yeah. The first time Agustin leaves his home is after he reads the card from Laura, and he sleeps in what appears to be a hotel motel attached to a train station, since he's getting a morning courtesy knock saying the train is leaving. He doesn't leave, which we don't know where he's going to go to, but my suspicion is to Seville, to where Laura is, but he doesn't go. He thinks about it, even stayed in the motel, but in the end he decides to stay. So the temptation arose from within, but he quelled it overnight. What he thought about and what prevented him from going isn't said, but my assumption is his daughter and his wife. As I was saying at an earlier point in the video, that I think Estrella doesn't only remember less of her mother during her childhood, as she stated, but also felt less, at least during her childhood, in certain moments, when Estrella and her mom, Julia, talk, and Estrella says her dad ran away in the dead of night, and Julia says don't say those things, and then Estrella throws the yarn that the mom is looping into a ball onto the floor. There's a distinct moment, well, it's this distinct moment that I feel for Julia, as she continues to loop the yarn, with most of the strings tangled on the floor, and she quietly attempts to reel in the falling yarn, as if almost metaphorical to her present state in the movie, with her marriage and her individual life, reeling it in. So, when Estrella decides to protest what is happening in the house, she hides under the bed. She doesn't like the atmosphere, she doesn't like the tension between her father and her mother. She doesn't like how she's feeling in relation to that tension. So she hides under the bed as a form of protest. Her mother begins to look for her desperately as she's hiding under the bed, and her mother walks into the room but doesn't notice that she's under the bed. Estrella is seen smiling and laughing a bit, enjoying the moment. Because I'm assuming, well, mom can't find me. And as day turns to night, and she hears her father's cane bouncing off of the floor, the attic floor, that is, she says that she knows that her father caught on to her game and was challenging her silence with his own, and that when she realized that his pain was far greater than her own, she's very attuned to this. She herself is feeling miserable with what's happening in the house and what's happening in her life. And in spite of all that, she's very attuned to how her father is feeling when she challenges her silence with his own. Very perceptive of her father's pain, but when she threw the yarn on the floor with her mom, she mostly focused on her own feelings at that moment and ran out of the room with no, well, not shown on screen, no, not very much, not much concern for her mother's feelings. She felt for her father here, though, and thought about it, even in her pain, even during her pain. But when it was with her mother, she didn't want to deal with it, and she left the room. So she gave her father more patience and understanding, it feels like, to me, from what we saw on the screen. Also, when Estrella was hiding under the bed, Julia went into panic mode. Very much severe panic mode. And searched for her daughter. And the father might have known that she was hiding, hence the challenge of her silence with his own. But instead of calming his wife, Julia, her anxiety and her worry about where Estrella is, he simply focuses on his own pain and demonstrates it to his daughter through his silence. As she states in the film, his silence was a challenge. You begin to see a clear picture of Agustin's mindset, his suffering, his own pain, and there is pain, and his melancholy and attachment to the past, and his selfishness of focusing on his own turmoil. Meanwhile, his wife and daughter are there with him. It really shows you how much it costs not moving on, and the weight he bared. But it also shows how it morphed from remembering and not moving on into selfishness once his family was there. You can really tell that Estrella really loves her father with all of this. After the scene where she is hiding, Estrella goes for a bike ride, where there's a time lapse and she is older. She says in this scene she wishes she can grow up faster to leave that place, her home. When she's writing back, she also states that she grew up in a similar fashion that everyone does, and she got used to being alone, and has come to not think about happiness all that much in her life. That's a very beautiful scene in a heartbreaking way to come to a point where you decide to not have happiness or joy in your life, or not being a principal concern in your life and just going with things. And her isolation, her state of accepting that being alone, it's just a part of it. But it's also interesting that she mentions that everyone grows up this way, so she doesn't exclude herself or put herself on a pedestal, saying it's only her. She says she grows up in a similar fashion that everyone does. So I'm assuming she's saying that everyone is this way, and that everyone has to deal. So that fact that she was incorporating a larger scope into her thought process, once again, made me think of her investigatory mind when she was a younger child in the beginning of the film. So yeah, finally, my favorite scene in the entire movie, and this is one of my favorite films of all time, top 3 at least. The conversation in the hotel, the question that Estrella has always had of Arenero/Laura is asked, and her father's response is, well, not really talking about it fully at the moment, and he leaves to go to the bathroom to get some fresh air and wash his face after Estrella asked that question. That entire scene grips me beyond belief. It's an honest conversation of trying to deal with elements of both their lives that they have dealt with in private. As Estrella grew, she wanted to leave her home and was fully aware that happiness wasn't something she'd focus on. Agustin never has moved on from his past with Arenero/Laura. And here is an honest moment that is very charged with history and feeling and family, and the father leaves to go to the bathroom and not fully disclose all the information. Some things are too hard to say. Certain things we've been through, private matters that shape us and our belief, perspective, and the entire notion of what life is about. Those things are very raw and powerful to us, and we keep those things close to us and don't share them, sometimes not even with our own families. Pain shapes us, regret and joy and wonder do too. Some things cut deeper than others, though, and when Agustin returns from the bathroom after he washes his face and tells Estrella that she should skip class, this could be a moment of either him wanting to spend time with her, to just be with her because he is considering suicide at this point, or to tell her the whole story of his past, or something else. But she says no, and she leaves him there listening to that music they were dancing to on her first communion. That hit hard. She leaves, and in her performance by the actress Ishar Boyen, I see that. I think she can see he's emotional. His eyes are teary, and for one reason or another, she leaves him there to his fate, which is unknown to her at the time. It's such a powerful scene with so much weight behind every moment, every expression, every statement that is made. Yeah, it's my favorite scene in the entire movie. One of the final scenes in the film is when we see the body of Agustin and we come to realize he committed suicide. So it makes me think, I wonder if he knew he was going to do it, like I mentioned when he was at the hotel with his daughter, in the restaurant portion of the hotel. A very important moment, the phone call that doesn't happen on screen, and the phone call receipt that Estrella finds and keeps and doesn't tell anyone about it. And now she has her own secret that she'll have to bear for the rest of her life. When Agustin on the last night of his life called the South, which I assume was to Elena Rio/Laura, and it makes me wonder if she picked up, and if she did, what did she say? Or if she didn't pick up, and is that why he committed suicide? Either or, if they spoke or they didn't speak, we know his choice afterwards. This brings me back to the hotel scene where they have that conversation where Agustin goes to wash his face after Estrella asks him about Elena Rios. Was that whole moment the cause of why he called the South? That moment led him to that phone call that got answered or not answered, and as a result, then he decided to commit suicide. I don't know. It's a mystery, as Agustin was a mystery to his daughter. So here we are at the end of the video. I don't want to end this without mentioning Julia again, who bears her own sorrow now after the final scene. Her tragedy is so known, people who are overlooked and are there but not at the forefront. Maybe you felt that way too. The second one, not the first. Yeah. Those have been my thoughts in El Sur.